The deadly consequences of an open border in rural Minnesota and the rest of America. A candid conversation about a recent drug bust in rural Minnesota and a partnership that nabbed two illegal aliens. Next. Sergeant Bryan Savaloja with the Wadena County Sheriff's Office is my guest. Thank you for your service, sir. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Wanted to talk about this recent drug case. It's a drug trafficking case in your county, in Wadena County. Five men, they were recently sentenced to over 43 years in prison. And Alpha News has also learned from ICE that two of them, Jesus and Carlos Valdovinos, are illegal aliens from Mexico. So this investigation, I know, is something that your team has pieced together now for years. It all starts on November 10th of 2023, and that's when law enforcement responded to a death caused by a methamphetamine and fentanyl overdose at a residence in your county. So walk us through then, Sergeant, what happened and how the investigation continued from there.
Well, unfortunately, yeah, this started with the death of one of our citizens. The deputies here are all trained death scene investigators, so they knew that something wasn't right. So they did a good initial investigation, and then we kind of picked it up from there after we get the report back from the medical examiner. Search warrants were done on different devices, including the victim's phone, which identified a person who was selling drugs to the victim. That person ended up being Bill Rude, who was one of the defendants in this indictment, who was also sentenced to 120 months in the case.
And ultimately, I know from there, Robert Anderson of Wadena, he was given an 11-year prison sentence for conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine and cocaine. You mentioned it's two other local men, ultimately. They're sentenced for their roles as well. And then your team also did a series of controlled buys as part of the investigation. Give us some perspective on all of this. It happens, in a community in West Central Minnesota, pretty small county where you are. I know you've been there, a deputy there for nearly 20 years. And talking about just the drugs in terms of size, as far as this seizure, how significant is all of this?
Well, this was a huge case. I mean, it's a huge case anywhere, let alone for it starting in Wadena County. Like I said, this started, unfortunately, with the death of one of our citizens. That led us to Rude. That, again, led us to Anderson after that, where we found that he was the one actually supplying the Wadena County area from the Twin Cities metro area. From there, the case just kept unfolding. Our guys and our investigators did a series of traffic stops that dealt with both Anderson and Aaron Heifert, which yielded pounds and pounds of methamphetamine. That's what led us to Valdovinos and Valdovinos Trejo as the source of the methamphetamine in the Twin Cities metro area.
So, as explained in the documents, Anderson would buy these bulk quantities of meth and cocaine from Valdovinos, Trejos, and Valdovinos, and then the U.S. Attorney's Office, as Anderson, would be selling them kind of downstream distributors in greater Minnesota where the drugs would go. But I think it kind of goes hand in hand with many of the often ignored crimes caused by open borders that we've had for years in our country. In fact, an ICE spokesperson told me that Jesus and Carlos Valdovinos, both of these men were removed before all of this. They obviously came right back to sell dangerous drugs that killed at least one person that we're aware of. What is your take on all of this?
Well, I think that statement kind of speaks for itself. I mean, we have dangerous people who are entering our country illegally and committing crimes that are killing our citizens. I want to be clear, we have zero issue if you want to come live in the USA, but we have a proper process to go through to avoid situations like this, hopefully.
Yeah, and it seems, a stark contrast between the open borders under President Biden, the record low numbers of crossings we seem to be seeing now under the Trump administration. Have you noticed any difference there at the sheriff's department?
Yeah, we've definitely noticed drugs are harder to come by. They are still here, but prices. Talking with our agents and investigators, they fluctuate from dealer to dealer based on demand. And that's why from from our perspective in Wadena County, that's why it's so important to never stop working on these types of cases.
Crime's certainly not the same throughout Minnesota, despite Mayor Fry's claims about crime being down. The Twin Cities is kind of this open air drug market, it seems almost for years now. You can go at any hour of any day to see video of it in several places, sadly, in Minneapolis and St. Paul. But overall, how do dangerous drugs like the ones in this case affect people and public safety in a small community like yours?
Well, we've seen what these drugs can do and how they tear families apart due to addiction. And again, being a small community, that hits us all. That's why we, along with the West Central Drug Task Force that we're a part of, we target the high-level drug traffickers to try to keep these drugs out of our communities. We're very fortunate that our agent here at the sheriff's office is very determined and very dedicated to his job. But if he was sitting here, he'd be the first to tell you that this case was a team effort that involved many agencies at the state and federal levels.
It is good to see law enforcement in Minnesota working together to help put a stop to this. As your department, the Otter Tail Sheriff's Office, the West Central Drug Task Force, the BCA, Minnesota State Patrol, and the DEA, they were all involved in this case. But Sergeant Bryan Savaloja with the Wadena County Sheriff's Office. Again, I want to thank you for your service and thank you for being here to talk about all of this.
Thanks, Liz. We appreciate it.
That will do it for this episode of Liz Collin Reports. We'll see you next time.